T-minus 3, 2, 1, 0.
Hey folks, welcome to the Launch Sequence podcast. It is an exciting week to be on the Launch Sequence. Oh boy. There's a lot of gameplay planned for Star Citizen, but not much of it's going to touch everything. And let me tell you folks, crafting. We've gotten a couple hours on hands-on with crafting this week, and it's telling. There's going to be a lot coming to Star Citizen surrounding this gameplay, from the inventory changing to exploration gameplay, mining and salvage chaining. Hell, you're going to be able to change the stats on your items and ships. So I thought I'd bring in TenPoundFortyTwo, regular here on this show. We like to get into a lot of deep discussions, I'd say, about like mechanics, speculation, where things are going. And he also got hours on hand with crafting. So we're going to have a back and forth talk about what the heck it means for the game, what it looks like right now, and what you can expect when it hits player hands, hopefully in the next couple months. Thanks for joining me, dude. How you doing today?
No, yeah, good. All the better for having crafted something and started, and that's for sure. So fun times. It's exciting. It's good times.
Your day has been made.
Yeah, my week.
Well,
that's too much. No, just the day.
I mean, it could be a week. I think of some people, this is the first time it feels like there's actual meaningful gameplay coming into Star Citizen, because there's always been this cutoff where you could do mining and refining, or you could do looting, you could do cargo hauling, but they were all kind of disconnected. Like there wasn't a central drive. And for a lot of folks, crafting is that drive. So hey, if it makes your week, let it make your week.
I think it has the. Oh, go on. Sorry, go.
No, you go.
But piggybacking off what you're saying, I think it has the potential to do what you're saying. It does have the potential to tie everything together, and therefore it is very exciting. So yeah, it's good.
But everything has potential, right? And I'm sure there are plenty of people who are watching the show right now and being like, but okay, Tomato, you have said multiple things are going to change the game. Why is crafting actually different? Is it actually different? Like, engineering came in last month, supposedly as another game changer. But it is so, I think many would say, undercooked that it's still not definitive. Now, before it was coming, I think most of us were saying it's only going to really affect people who are doing combat mostly. But besides that, you could say that some things, when they come into Star Citizen and are supposed to be a big deal, aren't as big a deal. Do you think it'll be the same with this?
If I'm completely honest, I think it's going to come in, if it does come in quite quickly at least, it will feel somewhat similar to engineering in that it's very, very tier zero, almost even maybe not even quite zero, like -1 or something. As it was in the test that we did. Maybe we should describe what happened in the test, but it's very much the basics. This isn't like a fully fledged crafting system that CIG are just about to just drop on us as like a incredible present to us. Like, it's the start, I think, of quite a long journey to build up a system that will be game changing and will tie all the gameplay together. But what we played the other day, I would say, it was almost like exactly what the tech preview channel is meant to be. It was a technical test to see if it worked, but it wasn't like massively focused on the gameplay or. Yeah, the short version is there's still a long way to go. It's not, in my opinion, I'd say this isn't like, I wouldn't have thought in 2026 that it will change people's worlds unless, like, you're obsessed with crafting and crafting is the only thing you're going to do. Then it will change your world, because you can't do that. So you played as well. What did you think?
I think the most important thing, so I think it's funny you mentioned tier 0 crafting, and we'll come back to that because they have the whole crafting in vultures and reclaimer, or reclaimers right now, which you could call an even more basic form. But I always kind of looked at that and I was like, well, yeah, technically, I mean, that is crafting. What is crafting? Crafting is literally just looking at two different things and saying those two things make another thing. And that's about it. It's at its core, it's not a very complex concept, but setting up all of the little bits and pieces of it that fit into each other it seems kind of hefty, like the
Yeah.
recipes and figuring out your list of materials and making sure all those materials have a place. So I sit here and I look at this first version of crafting and I think, well, if that's the work that they got done for this, and really the going beyond this more is like just making sure to apply the materials and the blueprints to the items and stuff like that. That's that's good. Cause what is crafting besides just coming up with those things? Um so I'm happy to see the way that it plays. I'm happy to see that like I can take some kind of material and another kind of material, I can make something out of it. The difference between those two materials can change the ultimate item that I get, and that the the process of collecting those items changed their materials, which then change the item, right? You can see how the ultimate goal is to make an item, and every person who's involved in that goal gets to have some say in how that item turns out. From the person who found the material to the person who mined or salvaged it to the person, I guess, I mean, sorry, cargo hauler, you're kind of you're just a people mover in this instance, but to the refining method, even like if somebody is refining in their ship and they crafted a bad catalyst to put into their refining, which they've talked about being part of the refining method, that bad catalyst could change the refining method, to change the quality of the finished ore, to change the crafted gun. And that is, I think that's really magical kind of, that's the most important part of
Yeah.
crafting to me. And that's what it feels like we're getting to from here.
But to be clear, that bit you just described at the end, to anybody listening, that currently isn't in the game, and so currently the only thing that affects it is the material quality, which we can talk about in a minute. But
Yes.
yeah,
Yeah.
I agree that the potential here is for a system, depending on how deep they go with it, it potentially can kind of like permeate through the whole game. Like it could get as kind of granular as like crafting ammo for weapons, like FPS weapons or ship ballistic weapons. Like they could go so deep with this. There's so much potential. Everybody mentions the Star Wars Galaxy system and as like a really good example.
Yeah.
And let's make it clear, what we're getting at the start isn't that by like a million miles, but there is potential here that it becomes something that is some people's whole game, maybe is the way to put it. Some people, if they really go deep, they really push into this over the next 5 years or so or whatever, then potentially this could be the thing that somebody just does. They literally they fire up Star Citizen and they craft. And that's what they enjoy doing. But right now, I think you got to just temper your expectations. What we're having in whenever it actually comes into the game, which we don't know when that will happen, I think is going to be it's quite limited in scope and it's quite basic in execution probably.
So it'll be like a similar, the same old Star Citizen
Yeah,
feature delivery kind of thing.
yeah, which I suppose is why I would still classify it as tier 0. Like compared to what they've laid out as what they want it to be, this is like the first version of mining or the first version of salvage. Is again, we don't know what actually is going to go live because they already maybe that's not something I can say. There's there's rumours that there's going to be a follow up test at some point in the
Hmm.
not too distant future. So um, we don't know if what we played will come to live in like 3, 7, 8, 9, or we 3. Gone back in time 4. We don't know. We don't know what will come live. Basically, is what I'm saying. So,
Yeah.
but if it was to come live as we played it the other day, it's very basic, I would say.
Yeah. So let's talk about that. This is the as you call it, tier 0 crafting. Um, First way to, I think, really solidify in people's minds what this is or what it can mean. This is for the people who are obsessed with crafting, right? The folks who got a vulture not because they want to salvage, but because they know they can make stuff from it. How does this differentiate from what we already know in the game as crafting, making those fuses and attachments in the back of your salvaging ship?
Yeah, so probably the major thing is the scope of what you can craft. So obviously, what you can craft now is fuses and small. I can't even remember what it is. It's basically a fuse. Can you multi tool you can do? there was effectively around 180 items that we could craft in this test that we did. They were roughly in order. You had helmets, armor, leg armor, arms, core armor, that sort of stuff. You had personal weapons like sidearm stuff like pistols. You had FPS like normal guns like the P4 AR or whatever. And then also the biggest item that you could craft in this test was ship weapons. And so they required the most 4 different materials for most of those, I think. And so the major difference from the game as it stands now is what you can craft. But the process of doing it obviously is completely different. So you have these fabricators, which is all over CIG's video stuff they showed us at CitizenCon. They come up your freight elevator, and then they are currently the kind of hub of where all your crafting will happen. So in the test that we did, the only way to see what blueprints you could do or you could craft was to go onto the screen. So one thing I would argue that they need to add before this goes live is some sort of mobiGlas app that also gives you that information, because at the moment, unless you take your fabricator with you, which you can do, you can literally pick it up and chuck it on a ship. Unless you've got it with you, you can't check recipes. So I guess obviously you can screenshot things and whatever. But
yeah,
there's loads of functionality and like quality of life stuff that I think would be really good if it was in the first release that currently isn't in. So yeah, ideally you want to be on a moon, you want to see some, I don't know, you see a rock that you're thinking about mining, and you should be able to, in theory, open up your mobiGlas, open up a blueprint app for the blueprints, and it basically shows you the blueprint apps, the blueprints that you own, and then you'd be able to check the recipes. So currently that sort of stuff is not in the game. You just can't do that. So anyway, you've got this fabricator, and it will pull resources out of your inventory. So if you're, say, in your instance hangar, so you're in your starting location, you pull up the fabricator, and then on there you can select the blueprints you want. It will then, you can either add boxes to the thing, I believe. Did you ever try that? I didn't try that. I just did the inventory.
No, I never put a box in there.
No, so I can't confirm that definitely is working, but I think in theory it does work. You can definitely put items back into dismantle, but we'll get back to that in a minute. But say you've got actually.
Sorry, I have a question for you there. Why would you put the boxes in there if you can just pull from your local inventory? The only time I can think is if you're in a place that doesn't have a local inventory, like out in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah, so if you've taken it off in a ship, I assume it can't pull from your ship inventory. I would assume is how it works.
Right.
But yeah, you're right. Like from a kind of ease point of view, there's no real reason why you would bother pulling up the boxes on your freight elevator and then moving them into
on. Yeah,
you just wouldn't. Yeah, but I think in theory they do allow you to do that. And so then if you've got the right things for the recipe, which we can get into a bit more depth later, you click craft, and then the timers were really short for this test because they wanted us to be able to test. So they shortened the timers down for refining and crafting. And so you wait for your thing, and then the thing does some light effects. Again, the same stuff that they showed us at CitizenCon, and then the door opens up and your gun, for instance, pops out. So that's the rough process of how it works. But the key thing, obviously, is that depending on the quality of the materials that you've used, so now minables, so hand mineable stuff, as well as just ship mineable stuff, quality is now in the game. So depending on the quality of the materials you've used, that will then affect certain stats on, again, for example, the weapon. So there's potential to come out with a gun that's significantly better than the stock version of that gun. So that's currently roughly where it stands.
So let's start from the end of that, going backwards with what you said. Yeah. You mentioned at the end there that you can change the stats of a gun. The changes that you saw from doing the crafting, how big were they? Did they feel like they would make an actual difference to players when it actually came to gameplay?
That's a good question, and I guess it depends on the sort of gameplay you're doing. I mean, I didn't get to compare the kind of weapon handling of a stock gun versus a crafted gun. You can see the stats of how they'll be affected. And I heard some reports of different people having quite significant percentage increases for things like fire rate of a gun or reload speed, things like that. That's the sort of stuff that we're talking about. And so in those examples, again, we're only talking about personal weapons here, but it does apply to ship weapons, I suppose, mainly as well. But
Mm-hmm.
for a personal weapon, if you're in a contested zone and you've, in theory, got a crafted gun that's had a load of upgrades versus somebody who's got the same gun but it's stock, well, you have got a significant advantage. If your gun will shoot faster or reload faster and you're in a 1v1 bit of combat, well, then it will do something. And I suppose as well for the more the PvP maybe side of the ship combat side of things, if you're in a fully kind of upgraded ship with the ship weapons that are all fire rate is better, or the damage, I don't know exactly what it does for the ship weapons, but if you're playing versus somebody who hasn't got an upgraded repeater of some sort and you have got an upgraded repeater, again, you have an advantage. So it will, in theory, affect gameplay. But I suppose more if you're on the PvE side, I don't think necessarily it won't necessarily be as crucial. I think you might find now that quite quickly, all your big PvP guys are all going to be using the best guns they possibly can, just because that's what that's about competitiveness. It's about getting that edge over somebody. So I think in that side, it will become quite critical quite quickly to how those guys play the game. But if you're running through an Onyx facility versus the NPCs, probably not as important. I wouldn't have thought.
You think it won't be worth it though, for it, like unless you do PvP?
A lot of that would depend on how they balance it. I mean, it would definitely be worth it to have a better gun. I mean, again, if you're in an Onyx facility running through that with a better gun, with better stats for all the things we just talked about, that will make your experience better and you'll be able to kill the NPCs quicker. It's just, I don't think I imagine the NPCs themselves won't be using crafted and upgraded guns. I would have thought they'd be using stock guns. And so that's a guess. Who knows what CIG will do there? But my guess would be that you maybe bosses might. No, to be fair, maybe like your major battles, or if you're in a big fight or an end of a section, you're against an NPC, they potentially could have a better gun because you want to maybe loot that gun and then take it for yourself. So who knows? This is the point. So much of this stuff is uncertain at this stage. CIG have given a broad outline of how they want to do this, but there's so many little details of how they expand crafting into the verse.
Yep.
We will only be able to tell when they've done a bit more, really.
Yeah. In my own tests with the P8SC, I was busy crafting the best SMG in the game. That was my focus, and I was able to make it using different levels of aluminum quality. 905 level versus I think it was like 755 or something like that. And the difference in improvement to the gun was noticeable.
Okay.
Not as noticeable as the difference between obviously the customized versus the fully crafted weapon, but there was a slight difference, mostly in the rounds per minute. And I'm thinking combining that with like a railgun, right? You get 15% more rounds per minute with a faster reload time, and then maybe you also craft the ammo itself so it's more effective. You could surprise people with those kinds of differences. Sometimes a battle comes down to a couple of shots making the difference, and if you can get a couple extra shots in while your armor takes a couple more shots before you get injured, or you know what would be cool? It's actually really exciting that they decided to tie progression to item stats and what kind of equipment you're using rather than your player's own skill levels, because now they can take those same items that define progression, define how you play. Let's say you are the kind of person who likes to run stealth. Yeah. And instead of leveling up your character so that they're less easy to spot by NPCs, you are getting armor that is more and more resistant to being scanned or pinged. And so instead of having two different tracks of progression where you're upgrading your character to make them better at staying hidden, but you're also looking for armor that can be better at stealth. Now you can focus on finding that armor and getting it, but then also crafting makes a difference in it because you can change the stats of that armor to make it better at stealth rather than having to find some way to mumbo jumbo. You're changing your own body to be better. It's just, I think it does a lot to centralize progress around the actual things in the game as opposed to just like some random bar graph for your character. Now it's bar
Yeah.
graphs for items instead.
Yeah, but you can, depending on how they do item recovery and how insurance applies to crafted stuff, there's potential here for this to be the, like you say, the main progression, gear progression to be a major part at least of how the game works. And what the problem will be, I think, if you can't, this might upset some people, but say you crafted a great gun, you ensure that, and then you can never lose it, then you don't really ever have any reason to recraft that gun. If you can just buy that gun back with the crafted elements, the stats, if you can buy
Yeah.
the increased stats back, you then have no reason to ever really do that crafting loop again. So there's questions around, somebody mentioned in the chat, the degradation of your weapons, whether they eventually conk out and you just have to start again with them. There's questions around when you do item recovery, do you get the crafted stats back with it? Again, there's so much stuff here that they have to work out, and they'll definitely upset some people. But I would say you don't want a game where you don't lose. So I'll do my quick mention of Arc Raiders, which I seem to mention every stream I'm doing though. Again, I'll put it out here clear. It is not anywhere near like a one-for-one game with Star Citizen, but it does have crafting in, it does have blueprints in, and it has guns. So there are some things you can take from it. The thing that game does well is that you have good stuff and you lose it, and then you get some other good stuff and then you lose it. There's this constant excitement of looting something really good, and then there's the I've lost it because I got killed, whatever. And so there's this constant back and forth between positive experiences with loot and negative experiences with loot. I'm slightly concerned that the way CRG could do it is that you only get the good stuff of like, oh, I've crafted this great thing. But then if there's no loss around these crafted items, you don't get that kind of ebb and flow feeling. You don't get the natural excitement of finding something good. Like if you've got everything perfect already, why would you ever loot anything in the game again? So there's things they can do around that, and yeah, repair, degradation of weapons. There's questions,
Yeah.
but we just don't know. We don't know what they're going to do.
It's definitely that's a huge balancing point that we've seen the gnashing of teeth start up a little bit with item recovery, is that a lot of people don't want to lose their stuff, feel like if there's a risk of losing something, I'm not going to use it.
Yeah.
So this is another part of crafting that's coming in. Item recovery is a big part of it. And so it is good to talk about. Basically, quick explainer for anybody who's getting caught up on this. Before 3.9, I think it was, in Star Citizen, you would lose everything every single time there was an update. Every quarter, everything would get wiped. So basically, most people lived with the idea that your inventory was whatever you bought, everything else not. Even before that, actually, we couldn't buy ships in games. So it was very basic. As more and more stuff started to get added to the pledge store, and they fixed this problem with wipes, we started to have more persistence in the game. So people started to say, hey, well, why I'm losing my stuff and I can't get it back. We had to do item resets. There was that whole era of just like character repair to do whatever it is you needed to do to fix all that stuff. But eventually that went away too, and they acknowledged that they needed a way for us to get our important stuff back, because we have to be able to lose stuff in this game. So flash forward to now, we can't get anything, or rather, I'm sorry, flash forward to now, and everything that you have on your body respawns with you. You have full item recovery because they wanted people, it was a playability move, honestly. I think they just wanted the game to be a little more fun right now. But that only happens because they don't want stuff to be duplicated. So the ultimate goal is that you are going to die in Star Citizen, or you can die in Star Citizen. Everything that you have on you can be taken by other people, but it will be marked as taken, and they have to go to a fence to get that, get it switched over so it's registered into them. You can register your stuff, so it will always be respawnable in your hangar. This is CIG's way of being like, you can lose things, but you can also get them back. And what we're talking about here is like there's a little balance that there needs to be. You have to have risk of losing things enough that people fear it and change the way they play about it, but not so much that they don't participate, right? And
Yeah.
I think having the ability to go press a button and say, like, it comes down to the money sink. Yeah, like
Yeah.
it should be expensive enough that you are insuring a lot of your stuff, like the most important stuff, but there are certain things you have to choose to not insure. At the same time, when people are in a video game, they kind of want all or nothing. They want it their way or not
Yeah.
a way. So it's like, does this even work?
It's a great question. And CIG have laid out some thoughts around how they might do this. It's all a bit kind of like it's all a bit like a cloud that you're staring at, saying, "What's the shape of that? Is that an elephant, or is it a snake?" I don't know. But we're looking at something where we don't really know, and they probably don't know until it's fully formed how all these things are gonna interact. And I suppose the thing with bringing this crafting stuff in is that it does complicate all of this stuff. Like they do have to think about how item recovery tier 1, which is in testing as we've seen in the monthly report, they have to think about how crafting will come into that, because they can't design a system that then just completely falls to pieces with crafting. So they may well have a load of the answers to this stuff, but they haven't. The item recovery post from Xylo, I think it was, is nearly a year old now, and we've had a couple of like mentions of things in various areas, but they obviously they can reserve the right to tweak what they've said in the past and change things, and so this will be one of those things where when it goes live, we'll then suddenly see what their plan is. But I do hope, in kind of answer to your original question, I do hope they don't just give us everything and don't ever allow us to lose anything, because I think that is not a good way to keep people engaged in the game long term. I think yes, it
Yeah.
keeps it less painful in the short term. Is that, oh, this person murdered me but I can get everything back, so it's fine. That's fine, but over many years, I think actually not losing stuff has the potential to be a bit of a killer for the game's long-term appeal. But that's just
There's
my
got to
opinion.
be
Other people
churn.
disagree. Yeah, you'd hope so.
Yeah. Like you got to, as I've gotten older, I've gotten more and more okay with it, but I think you really got to be okay with losing stuff in video games. And video games have taught us so much to hold on to the most powerful things, because video games themselves are
Yeah,
kind of stingy with powerful items and things. They don't like, it's hard to balance if you keep giving somebody something really good. Excuse me, sorry. So they set the game up in this way where you are pursuing all these really high level items, but they also then have to consider, what if this person hoards them? We can't let them have all this powerful stuff. So we have to
yeah,
make artificial ways to limit it. And it's like, this has taught players to play in a way where they don't want to lose stuff because they don't know when they'll get something else cool. But I think if
yeah,
you are willing to lose, it can make the long term of this game a lot cooler, and a lot of games really.
yeah. I mean, there are different approaches that they could take. So obviously, some games wipe, and so you build up all your gear and it gets wiped and you start again. They're not going to do that in Star Citizen.
Hmm.
Another approach that games take is just to increasingly raise the power level of new items in the game continually. So maybe we obviously don't quite have levels in this way in the Star Citizen, but say there was a level 10 gun that was the maximum they could do. Well, in order to get people to be more interested and come back into the game, in theory, some games say, well, now there's a level 15 gun, and so everybody goes out and crafts that and makes that, and then they just keep going up and up and up, and there's no way to stop that. I think the better way to stop it is that people have experienced loss, and that's okay. And it just keeps people going round the crafting loop because you lose something, you want to get a good weapon again, so you craft it up, you use it for a while, then you lose it again. Like, I think that's totally fine. But I know some people, what's complicated maybe is that there's the concept of store-bought items and how that all ties into this. And obviously they can't be lost because people have paid money for them. And so how, again, that
Yeah.
system integrates into all this is probably too much for this episode. But yeah, there's all sorts of questions there.
Yeah, there really is. There are potential problems with the system and the balance and the way that it works. And one of those, I think, is inventory. I was surprised to not see the inventory included in this first test. Now, for anybody who's listening, we're like halfway through this, and I want to be clear. Everything we're talking about is being talked about this way because it's still under NDA, and it's under NDA because it's not ready. There very well could be, by the time they get to the point where they're actually testing this with the player base, a lot of the stuff we're talking about could be figured out. This is just what we're seeing from this first test. So I was surprised to see that there wasn't an inventory. I don't think this feature can launch live without a new inventory. Do you think that I'm wrong there? Why do you think we didn't see it in this first test?
Do I think you're wrong? I think, well, separate from crafting the new inventory, we need the new inventory anyway, so that's one thing. But yes, the way to display quality in, I mean, well, it's worth saying in the current inventory in this test, they did display quality. So say you picked up a hand mineable gem, it just said underneath the name of the gem and then the quality of it. So they don't have, so they in theory could launch with the current inventory. It works and it makes sense. But I guess very much in an ideal scenario, in an ideal world, you'd 100% have the new inventory and it would make all the stuff much, much clearer. So, I mean, why haven't we got it? I guess the answer is that it's not ready. Like, again, we've seen that it's in testing. Yeah. We've seen examples of it at CitizenCon. I mean, I don't want to skip too far ahead, but one of the questions is when any of this hits live servers. And so maybe, like you said, by the time it goes to live servers and it's out of NDA at least, they have brought all of it together. I would agree. I think in an ideal world, by the time this goes to like an open or wave 1 PT or whatever, you would assume that they'd want the new inventory in there as well. But we know that CIG don't always do the best case scenario things. And so would you be shocked if we didn't get the new inventory for another kind of half a year or year? Like,
yeah, I would be.
I don't know. You would be. I mean, I think I would be, but at the same time, I wouldn't be. Just knowing.
I'd be truly disappointed.
Yeah, disappointed is probably the absolutely right word. I would be very disappointed if we don't see crafting and the inventory come together. But knowing this project and how sometimes things have come out and the broken state that things have sometimes come out, I could see the inventory not being ready for crafting when it comes out. But again, who knows when crafting will come out?
Yeah, that's fair. So another potential problem that could pop up here is that, players are going to be excited about crafted goods, but like you said, well, actually, no, you were talking about store-bought, pledge-bought. There are also other things in the game that can be bought that aren't crafted. Basically, the idea here is anything player-made is going to be better than things that aren't player-made. Do you think this will completely wipe out the reason to have those more basic items? Is there going to be like is there a reason to use both crafted goods and also not crafted goods?
I guess it depends on how have you got access to the crafted goods. Like in my mind, again, this is why I don't think this is necessarily coming as soon as some people maybe are saying. I don't think anybody actually is saying it's coming soon. But in my mind, the way that the blueprints are currently set up, this will answer your question eventually. I'll get around to it. But the way the blueprints are currently set up in the game is just that everybody in Evocati just had the whole 180 odd blueprints on their fabricator. That, as far as I'm aware, is not what the plan will be for when this would go live. In that it, again, do another Arc Raiders shout. I imagine it will be similar to that in that we're finding blueprints, and so we'll start off maybe with a blue. Maybe CIG will give everybody a blueprint for a basic helmet, basic set of armor, a multi-tool, and maybe that will be it. And so you start off with the ability to do some crafting, but it's very limited. And then in the loot pool and at the end of mission rewards, reputation stuff, events, however they want to do it, there'll be ways for us to earn certain blueprints, but I would have thought the majority of the blueprints in the game will be earnable through looting in various like high value locations. So you imagine like the end room of Onyx or something, or there'll be a chance that certain blueprints spawn. Again, pretty similar to how a lot of games do this, Arc Raiders again. And so, in answer to your original question, is there a place for stock items? Well, there is if you can't craft it. If you've not gone and found the blueprint for your gun, your favorite SMG in the game, if you haven't got the blueprint for it, well, you can't access that unless you're buying it from a player. And player trading is another thing, but that's even who knows when that comes. And so, I imagine we still will be, again, depending on how they roll the blueprints out. I imagine we still will be using stock items until we build up our blueprint library to be able to craft these other better versions of them.
So that is all well and good, but wouldn't that, I mean, and money sinks are a thing, obviously, so ensuring things to make sure you can get them back when you lose them will impede the ability to do that. But don't you still feel like this leaves open the possibility that it's all just based around how many blueprints everyone gets, and once people get all their blueprints, there's not as much of like a crafting economy. People have their blueprints, they can easily craft that if they want. They're not running the missions to collect those blueprints. They're not looting as much. I want to preface that question real quick with the point that CIG is changing how rewards work in Star Citizen. For anybody who doesn't know, right now we get a weapon, a ship, or an item as a reward. But because eventually those items will be able to be lost, the things in game, whether it's a mission giver or a loot box or some kind of a mission or dungeon, when it gives you a weapon, instead it's going to give you a blueprint in the future, because that weapon would be able to break and go away. So the point is, our rewards are all supposed to be based around blueprints. Our true desire is supposed to be getting blueprints for the things we really like. What happens when everyone gets their blueprints?
Yeah, it's a good question, and it is a proper concern. I think this one solution that people have talked about is that they could be limited use blueprints, which has its pros and cons. I could see that for maybe really high value, like high tier things. And obviously, remember, blueprints at some stage are going to apply to much more than this first test. In theory, we're talking actual ships, like ship components, and then eventually actual ship blueprints, and then you research them to upgrade to different. Anyway, there's a chance that the highest, I would be tempted, I think, for the highest end stuff to maybe be, is this the right way to do it? I don't know. They need to have a think around, should they be limited in that you get a blueprint for doing this crazy chain, and then you've got a certain amount of uses, and then you've maybe got to run it again if you want. You're right, because they've talked about the fact that there'll be thousands of blueprints. So the idea that one person will collect them all is maybe quite. Is that realistic? I think maybe there'll be so many blueprints.
I
that
mean,
maybe.
Let's be real, dude. It's the internet.
Yeah, but your average player might not. The average player will probably not max out all the blueprints and then be like, "Well, I'm done."
Yeah,
but
that's
some
true.
people will. You're right. But yeah, there are ways around it. I mean, I hope personally that it gets as granular as like there's blueprints for weapon attachments. like we said, there's blueprints for ammo, different ship components, and then there's researchable versions of all these and things that blueprints. I believe I can't remember exactly, but the research system is also you have to find blueprints to do research to upgrade.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
there in theory is
Upgrading
like
and crafting are their own separate blueprints for each item.
I think so. Yeah. So in theory, when there's maybe say there's like 3,000 blueprints, well then there's upgrade blueprints for those ones as well. And so in theory, the scale of this is so huge that it should last people for years. That's my hope, at least. But yeah, there are potentially things they could do to limit blueprints, to set
Yeah.
times or amounts that would mean that it continues as an ongoing loop. But again, we're guessing really to see what CIG will do, and this thing that we're talking about here, the idea of looting for blueprints and finding them, that isn't in this first test, and so we don't know what they'll do. Plus, they'll keep on adding new items, I suppose, is
Yeah.
so yeah, it's interesting to see what they'll do.
It is. You mentioned there the granularity of the crafting. I actually wanted to ask you about something that I saw when we were testing. There will be parts or weapons that you have to make that will ask for things like power regulators or other things like that. So you have these like small items that get called for crafting. You also have each actual thing you're crafting is broken up into different parts. So a gun would be a stock, a barrel, and a frame.
Yep.
Those three parts would use different materials. It seems though like Star Citizen is pursuing a crafting method that doesn't necessarily say everything is crafted, right? Those parts don't have their own recipe. You can't make a frame and then use that frame to make
Not
different
yet.
guns. You think they're going to do that?
I don't know if they're going to. This is kind of my point with all of this, is that we don't know how deep they're going to go. All we know is what we see right now, which is a pretty
But
basic
they've never
version.
said that, have they? Like
They
they've
haven't
never
said that.
explicitly said everything's
No, no,
crafted.
they haven't. But if they, this is my thing of like, how deep are they going to push this? How where are they going to decide? Oh, this is enough. They have the potential to do a really really in depth system, and maybe that's off putting to some people. The more deep they go, it becomes kind of unusable for your basic or your new player. Maybe there's questions around that.
Yeah.
But my point would be, I suppose what I'm saying is what they've said and what they've shown us as their basic concept, I don't think it's nowhere near the full potential of where this could go. And so I'm definitely speculating. Let me make it clear that we're definitely speculating, but I wouldn't be completely shocked that if in 10 years, like you say, the barrel of the gun, could you craft that? We don't know. We don't know what they're going to do. But you're right. They haven't said that. But we just don't know where
Yeah.
they will
That
go
would
with
be
it.
a crazy system, dude. Like because they have
Yeah.
all of their guns decided, right? They can't just be like, "Oh, well, you crafted this barrel and that stock and that frame, and you've created a new gun in Star Citizen."
That sounds cool though, doesn't it?
It sounds pretty cool, but when we get guns like the kill shot and they build all these things so
Yeah,
specifically,
yeah.
and then they go and they sell those things on the store, it's like it's going to be a lot more complicated to allow people to make their own creations. But it would be
Yeah,
cool
you're
though
right. You're
to still say certain types of frames maybe and certain types of
right. Yeah.
stocks can go onto certain guns. I don't know how I'm not as crazy about getting crafting to be more granular. I'm mainly interested in crafting being a part of a system. So I like
Yeah.
where they're going with it. But in terms of specifics, it's exciting to see what could happen. I don't know about the whole crafting different parts.
And
The other
nor do I. Nor do I. Let me make it clear. I'm not saying that's going to happen. I'm saying they could, in theory, do that, but
yeah,
we'll see where
well,
they go with
Chris, you know.
it.
Uh the other thing is that FPS and ship minables are listed differently when you are trying to do crafting. So for FPS minables, they list them as units, whereas for ship minables, they're listed as I think either micro or pico SCU. Do you think that's
CSU, was it? CSU, I think.
CSCU? Yeah.
Something like that.
What do you think of the fact that they're like actually measuring the different minables differently?
Uh, well, maybe this is an example where it gets too, but like the whole thing I just described there, maybe it's too complicated. I would argue that it's not necessarily that clear what any of these numbers really mean. And so, yes, having different values and different things for different things is not the most straightforward. But again, it's early stuff on this. There's complicated stuff about mixing quality here as well. Like there's all sorts of stuff there's not really we're not really sure how any of it's going to play out yet. It's mixing quality is a complicated thing. Like there's all
Yeah.
sorts of little things, like you can't stack the gems at the moment. There's tons of little things about this that aren't ready to go live. So there's all
Or
sorts
the
of questions.
fact
But yeah,
the fact that there are 1,000 potential quality levels. I don't even like we were talking about inventory earlier. How do you work around there being 1,000 potential different versions of potentially 12 plus different materials?
yeah, yeah. I mean, again, it gives them the breadth to go quite wide with it and quite in depth. And so you might find, say, some gold that's quality 987, and you're like, ooh, that's good. But then you might still be searching for something that's 997 or whatever. As in, I don't know. I quite like the fact that they've gone to 1,000, because I think it just means there's more options for excitement within that when you find that little bit of gold that's slightly better, and that's good. Whereas if it was just to like 100, I don't know. But yeah, you're right.
I mean, is
There's
it
also
really that different to find gold at quality level 992 as opposed to 914?
uh, well, based on some of the percentages, it might be a bit of a percentage change between that. So
I mean, sorry. I mean, if on a 100-point scale versus a 1,000-point scale.
uh, well, yeah, no, you're right. I guess in some ways it makes not much difference if you're right, if it's 94 versus 96, but it sounds more exciting when you get like a 992 now.
It does. You're not wrong.
Oh
You're not
dear.
wrong. You could probably scale it quite a bit too. You could say like high security systems. This is a little gamey, but high security systems max quality is like 300 something. And you can come up with lore reasons for that. All the most valuable
Yeah.
stuff has been stripped out. And that would actually do a good job of limiting certain areas to certain like item levels. But
Yeah.
at the same time, still, then you could be like, well, why not just say that high security systems are only quality level 30 and below? Like, why 1,000 and not 100? And maybe there's a good reason for it. We'll find out eventually. But
It,
I can't imagine how it's going to work when it comes to like inventory and managing logistics. The boxes that you have to carry around, how you have to physically organize them is all kind of crazy when you have that many different variables.
yes. I mean, I think it might just be as simple as 900 and something sounds cooler than 90. That it might just be as simple as that. But you're right.
Yeah.
If you've now got 1,000 different box combinations of gold versus 100, and so how do they get combined in your inventory? Do they get blended, and then the quality is an average of them? We don't really know. They could do something like that, which might solve that particular problem. Is that
It'll be
you you
weird.
you stack, yeah, you might stack four different piles of gold that you've refined, and they've all got different values, but when you combine them, they get an average. I don't know. We don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. Going back to kind of what I said about the gems being listed separately from the commodities, a interesting point was brought up by a supporter in the chat here on the live show. It could just be the difference between one being physicalized and one not being physicalized. And something that was interesting in this test we did with crafting was that material boxes can now be partially filled. I do wonder
Yeah.
if they will ever get around to physicalizing the commodities, like the large scale minables, to the point where you could just like pull a gem of that commodity out, or if they'll always look at these different materials as different sort of types of entity.
That's a very good question. But yes, I agree. I wonder what they'll do, but We've got no way to know at this point, but yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah. All right. Next thing to talk about is something that we have neglected to touch on this whole time, which I think has been very rude. But like, Star Citizen is not just a combat game, and a lot of folks have found themselves convinced it is. I will say CIG does a lot of marketing using combat. I guess it's easy. They also had a lot of combat gameplay coming from Squadron. It's easy to make, but like as we've been saying, industry just hasn't been created enough yet. And crafting, I think, makes a really, 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 really big difference in that regard. So considering this isn't just combat, we're not just crafting guns and stuff. Can you um, talk a little bit about the potential you see when it comes to other professions and how they could benefit from crafting? Maybe like people who are interested in game loops that wouldn't find you competing with other players can still find a lot to learn from crafting. And I'm interested in hearing what you might be thinking just from this first test.
Yeah, I mean the obvious one is mining now, and so did you check whether the quality of your refined commodity sells for more or not? Do
No,
you
I
know
did
if
not.
that's the thing? No, so
No.
that's potentially one thing now is that for mining, so you go up to a rock, so say you're in a ship, you go up to a rock, you scan the ship, and you'll then get these numbers underneath that CIG have shown in various things CitizenCon and talked about. And so now mining is not just about what's the most valuable commodity, it's now also about what's the quality of that mineral or whatever. And
Yeah.
so that does change things quite a bit for the mining loop. You might run around scanning things, you might find a giant thing of whatever gold again, but then you look at it and you're like, well, actually, that's not worth me refining because the quality's too low. It's not worth me mining. So it will affect that. I suppose the bigger case will be if you're a miner who also wants to craft, it will have a huge impact on you. I suppose if you're just a miner, will you just run around mining stuff, refining it and selling it? And will you have to engage in the quality stuff that much? Maybe, maybe not. What I would say with all of this and the industry stuff, I don't think that stuff really kicks off until base building comes into the picture. I think I think once you've got actual people wanting to, and again, player trading tools, once you've got people wanting to like order like large amounts of resources to build a base, at that stage, I think people who are mining, salvaging materials, who are cargo hauling huge quantities of iron around so this person can build this thing over here. That's, I think, the point where all of this ties in together. I think at the moment, crafting on its own, especially in the state that it was in this test, it doesn't necessarily change the game for the more industrial type players. Again, if you're into salvaging, well, there's no quality on salvaging. We know that salvaging will eventually. So say you're breaking up a ship. Well, in theory, the materials that go into the recipe to craft that ship will come out the other end when you then salvage that ship. If that makes any
Yeah.
sense. That's obviously not in the game right now. We've just got the basic materials that we salvage. So I think it's quite a long
But
way. Yeah, go on. Yeah.
when you dismantle things though in the fabricator, you do get materials back right now.
But only if you've crafted them in this current test.
Yeah,
So
because they have the
if you
recipe already assigned.
yeah, exactly. So the game changes somewhat when they say, well, every item in the game has a recipe, and so if you loot this thing and then you take it back to your fabricator and dismantle it, you get the materials. That changes everything for the looting loop, so to speak.
Yeah.
But as the test was right now, and as it looks as though it's going to go forward in its first iteration for salvage, especially, does it change anything for salvagers? Well, only if they want to craft, I think, is the way to look at it.
Yeah, it really just changes your potential reason for doing it. Probably more for people who are in orgs who are going to be needing to
Yeah,
fulfill orders and like get supplies for their friends. But if somebody is a solo player who just hops in the game,
yeah,
crafting might not be an incentive to do things so much as from an industrial standpoint, but there are things that you can make to benefit people who aren't doing combat, right? You can craft mining lasers, salvage tools, tractor beams, all that kind of stuff. And those things could
Yeah. Not
make,
now. Make it clear.
well,
Not now, but
yes, yes,
hopefully by
yes.
this time this comes live. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So one of the things they showed us, which got the biggest cheers at CitizenCon, they showed us a quantum drive spooling up quickly. I think they showed a gun with less recoil, but they also showed salvage beams, and the
Yeah.
the crafted salvage beam was so much more impressive. And I think anybody who's done salvage, you love the like slow methodology of it, but being able to equip a beam because you want to go twice as fast is that's worth doing some work for, right? People
For
would
sure.
go and run some Wicklow missions to try and trade in for that, which is sort of, I think, I mean, what CIG said they were trying to build with Wicklow. People would absolutely be willing to do certain things, buy stuff from certain miners, take on certain missions because they knew at the end of it they might get a 50% stronger salvage beam.
Yeah. 100%. Yeah. But my question is when any of that does come in. That as in like
Yeah.
I completely agree. I
That's not
completely agree.
this test. You're right.
You're right. When you can get a blueprint that changes your salvage components, that then itself is a thing for salvage people to engage in the crafting loop. But can I? Has anybody heard the tale of No. Has anybody heard the tale of how Star Citizen tends to get features in this game where they tend to come in, and then it doesn't necessarily quickly move from tier 0 to tier 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5. You could argue that the way features come into this game is that they come in and then
Hey, man.
it tends to leave them alone for a while.
Look, I'll have you know, docking functionality got some work on the monthly report this month, okay? It's only been
Did it?
4 years since that was
Okay.
added.
How about fueling? How's fueling coming along for our fuel guys?
Yeah, well, it's just about as good as ship naming, okay?
Well, yeah, yeah, very good. Yeah, I'm not. My hope is that crafting is like this isn't a like chuck it in the game and then forget about it. This is like, we know that this is like a core progression for the game, and therefore we're going to just continually work at this, at this. And so
Yeah.
you're right. Whilst we've only got a few categories of things we can craft now, hopefully a year down the line after it comes out, you'd be looking at it and saying, well, it opened up to all sorts of different things. But that will depend on how CIG approach this.
Yeah, absolutely. And I am getting a little ahead of myself. We know that this first version of crafting is supposed to be uh personal items, FPS weapons, armor, and like I think really small. I don't even know if they said small ship components, but it's going to be a basic version here first. And I think the most important thing is just that they get recipes attached to everything.
Yeah.
Um and that will all start to quantify materials. I couldn't tell you like more than 5 materials in this game right now because they just don't matter.
Yeah.
But I think once crafting comes in and we all actually care about what things are made of, we'll know what resources we need, where you can probably find them, and that's how you build out a game. Um I want to say that the idea that it could be focused around combat right now could be a little bit annoying.
It's just the easiest thing for them to do and to test,
Yeah.
probably. But yeah,
Yeah.
you're right. It doesn't help that narrative that people have where they're like, this game is about combat, and when the first things coming in for crafting are all combat things, really, like armor or ship weapons or personal weapons. But at the same time, crafting for miners, it directly upgrades the mining experience. So yeah.
Um How about for people who are maybe going to get into this? And I don't think a lot of people who are, if you're listening to this podcast, sorry, you're kind of hardcore. All right. Or you like our voices and pretty faces. I don't know. We appreciate you being here. But if people are in this podcast, they're probably not quote unquote casual if you're
Yeah.
considering the whole market. But there is a difference between playing with your org every other day, jumping into the game every day, doing things constantly, and having like a couple hours every week that you can jump in and play. How do you think this would, if at all, does it affect the more casual player in this first iteration of crafting? This basic one we're talking about.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think you probably can just completely ignore it if you don't want to engage in it. Um, if we're describing a casual player, they might not be aware of it. Like a casual
Yeah,
player, I assume, just turns the game on and just works out what they're doing. They're not watching all the ISCs like we are. They're not obsessed with the Reddit, and they don't
true.
venture into Spectrum like with,
God
or
bless
at
them.
least yeah, exactly. So I imagine I imagine that your average casual player, they might see a trailer for the patch and they'll be like, oh, crafting's in. That might be the maximum they engage with it. I think once they start to do, if you start to do things that involve coming up against other players, you maybe then move into not being so casual. So say you're going in the contested zones, or you're wanting to do some stuff in Hathor. Well, then you'll be, again, like we said, you'll be potentially thinking, why do I keep dying? Why does I've got the drop on this person, I'm shooting them, but they're killing me somehow. And the answer will maybe be that they've got better armor and guns. And so at that stage, you maybe go onto the Reddit and you search what's going on, and then you're not suddenly not a casual player. But I would
Man,
have
that's
thought,
a
yeah,
crappy way to find out.
well, yeah, but I think unfortunately that
It's like I
I saw a
suck.
Reddit post, the other day saying, "Why do I keep dying?" Anyway, but I
And everybody was like, skill.
well, they tried to help, but it might have been skill.
Good on
But
them.
the key thing here is that I think you don't probably have to engage in this first version of crafting, and obviously the problem there is that you don't have to engage with the crafting, but you've got no other way if you don't do it yourself, because we don't have player trading or any social stuff that would allow you to do anything like that apart from outside game stuff. Basically what I'm saying is you either craft it yourself in this first version that we
Mhm.
tested at least, or you're locked out. So you can't easily in game at least buy crafted items from other people. You're having to use out of game stuff to do that. And so there might be a bit of a, like you say, for the casual player, if they're unaware that this is all going on, they are a bit of a disadvantage. But I mean, CIG will just say, well, it's an alpha, and we're
Of
testing, so
course.
whatever.
Yeah, it's we need social tools. We need the ability to
Yeah,
talk and meet up with people. We need the ability to change ownership and trade things. Like it's becoming way too obvious. This is just another step in that direction. But you're saying that, if we did have the social tools, this first iteration is going to be rough because there's not as much of like a trade aspect to it. But in the long term, people won't even have to do crafting, right? To get these good items.
yeah. I think the way the game should probably work, and where I think the way a lot of games work, is that everybody in a broad game like this, and this maybe is the broadest of all the games, there'll be certain people who want to do certain things and certain people who want to do other things. And in an ideal world, they all can interact with each other in different ways and they support each other. So the people who want to do crafting, well, they can support the people who don't want to do crafting by setting up shops and selling people their really good crafted stuff. It's a
Hmm.
player economy. How, again, we don't really know what CIG are going to do for this. We don't know how they're going to do it. We don't know when they're going to do it. But in theory, in terms of MMOs, that the ability to buy and sell from each other is a kind of key part of these sorts of games. And so we hope that, yeah, you could in theory be heavily into Star Citizen in like 10 years time, like a hardcore player, but in theory you've never crafted because you just didn't fancy it and you bought the goods off somebody else who loved it. And you basically you support each other's gameplay by buying and crafting. This person buys, this person crafts, and they have this relationship that supports each other. That in theory is how it should work. Whether it does work like that remains to be seen.
Yeah. And it probably won't, but I do hope that that's the direction we go. And I think the community itself needs to build that meta. There are a lot of people, prominent figures in the community, many I think maybe listening to this show and probably know they're being talked about that. Push forward this idea like we should be cordial with each other. We should try not to shoot first. ask questions first, trade things. Like Star Citizen can be a violent game, but we as a community should try to build a meta that focuses on like trade and coming together and actually working together to build stuff. So I hope that is the direction it goes in, because it could be really cool if it works out, but obviously it will never be perfect.
Yeah, and that stuff all does require CIG to put in some of their security plans, and again to create safe systems where you can trade without
Make a
being
safe?
well,
What?
but lawful, I think, is the correct term that CIG put on the 1.0 plan at least. So a lawful system or two. So that again, it's gonna all of this stuff and the game being formed into a fun game requires a lot of work still on these sorts of things. And
Yeah.
again, they laid out their plans for 1.0 at CitizenCon a couple of years ago. They are still the plans as far as we know, and so it's just my whole thing. I basically I'm summarizing my feelings about the game is, or the question I'm asking myself is, are we moving to 1.0? Are we heading towards that vision that they laid out? And I suppose crafting, as we talk about here, is a good example that they are slowly starting to work on this stuff that in theory feeds into this trading system and social tool stuff. If we could blink and be awake, say what? No, if we were snapped by Thanos or whatever it is for 5 years, is that how long they all disappeared for? And then we reappeared once
Uh-huh.
the Avengers saved everything.
Oh
I would
man.
hope in 5 years' time, I'm making up the number. Definitely in 10 years' time, I'd hope that all that we're talking about here, this crafting stuff, would be an actual. Yeah, sorry, that is a spoiler. Apologies if you've not seen the last one, but it's been quite a while now, so you should know that. But there,
Wait, Thanos won? Are you kidding me?
well, no, then he didn't win. He lost in the end. But anyway, but in theory, this should all.
Another spoiler. This guy.
In theory, this should all have formed into a game, and obviously at the moment it's whatever you want to call it. You want to call it a tech demo. You want to call it a mess, whatever you want to call it. But in theory, these things are starting to build. If you've built the foundation now with all the tech they've done, they're starting to build towards an actual game. And yeah, 5 years of Snap, I think we might see that it looks a lot better in 5 years time. But
Man, I feel like Thanos would still be sitting at the computer 5 years later, like, guys, wait, don't come back. They're still desync. Sorry. Come back later. Unsnap.
well, yeah, but
Um,
yeah, well, yeah.
I do agree though. It gets a little old to hear, because I know I've been saying it a lot since like 323, really. I've been saying different versions of it, but it is starting to turn into a game. The things like engineering, crafting, the cargo refactor, and really missions and like narrative all build out a game a lot more effectively than just adding features in willy-nilly. That being said, I saw somebody say somebody tried the argument with me already that crafting shouldn't be getting added into the game because they need to focus on making the game playable. And I'm like, dude, we just did a year of that. I mean, I know it didn't become
Didn't
perfect like
work.
people wanted, but like it's not going to. It can't. They have to add features.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really know what you'd say. I would argue, has that person considered where the game is heading? I mean, well, we don't need to get into this again. We tried a year of playability, didn't we? They did it. Why they did it, we could argue. Again, we could argue they actually were more focused on Squadron, or their features weren't ready, so they had to, or they wanted to make more money by just selling ships all the time. We could argue all of those things, but they did it, and the game, I would say, hasn't necessarily massively moved forward in a year. It's not suddenly like, oh wow, Star Citizens are actually playable now. So how many years are you prepared to wait where if you put everything on hold, no crafting, no base building, engineering, none of it, how long are you prepared to put the game on hold whilst they make it playable, and then they'll add in all the features again and break it again? Like what? I feel like we've have we not
It's the
have we
same
not
thing. We
solved
went
this?
over this.
We
Yeah.
know this. We all know this now. We know that the game they have in again to get to 1.0, to get to the actual vision of the game where it's like, I want to play this game. That's my own personal view, where I want to play this game as much as I possibly can because it's a good game. To get there, they have to start developing all this stuff that they're talking about. Anyway, you triggered me slightly there. I'll take a breath.
Bro, I'm triggered. I'm so sick of this idea that we shouldn't add features to a game that doesn't have the feature. Like we can't go through a year of, okay, they're going to stop feature development and focus on just making a game where people can jump in and have fun. Obviously, we want them to actually make it fun, but like they can only do so much. They need to make money, they need to develop the engine, they have to finish Squadron 42, and they have to get features in that are actually interesting. If we literally sit here and say, don't work on the inventory, don't work on get things fixed, then at the end of that period, we're still going to look at a working unfinished inventory and be like, we need to finish it. It doesn't make sense to not build the features out. I would say just don't play the game. Drop it. It's not worth it. If you don't want to play a game that is broken and doesn't play correctly, then stop playing it. I'm sorry. I also
that's
triggered.
probably the answer. Yeah, it's okay. It's all good.
All right. All right. Next point. I'm gonna record that one for the people in the back. I know Mrs. Tomato's gonna love that one. Let's move on to something a little bit more interesting and enjoyable for y'all. We talked about how this might affect the casual sort of solo player experience. How about orgs? Do you think that what they're doing with crafting and material quality and wanting to pursue the best things to craft the best stuff, do you think it's actually going to develop real territory control and like resource wars in the game in the near future? Are people actually going to be fighting to hold this stuff down, or will it just be business as usual?
I think for the sorts of orgs who have been like doing Hathor stuff and grinding for like Wicklow Aegises and things like that, for those guys, this is like another thing, isn't it? It's another thing on top, depending on the recipes. So say there's a meta gun, which there will be, like the way this works. There'll be a most effective chip gun and FPS gun. And that's the recipe for that requires like a Karanite or whatever from Hathor, or maybe some worm Valakar big fangs or whatever. Depending on the recipes that CIG select for high value items, I think those guys will fight over those things for sure. Yeah, because they'll be like, well, in order for our org to win these things or whatever, we need to have the best stuff. Therefore, we need to get the best stuff, and we need to stop other people from getting the best stuff. Like, I think that definitely will happen. But what I'm talking about there is quite PvP focused orgs. For kind of the less competitive orgs, I think maybe they're not going to be like fighting over stuff and like trying to get into Hathor if that's not really their thing. But I think for sure there's a number of months worth of gameplay maybe there for those orgs to like build up their resources, craft all the best stuff for their org, the armor that org likes, the visual look or whatever. There's gameplay to basically to do the logistics of building up your supply. What you then do with that supply, if you're like a PvP org who wants to go and fight, then that's fine. That makes sense. That's what you do. If you're like a more logistic based org, well, once you've done the logistics and you've got everything, I don't know what exactly you do, but there's a level of role playing potentially involved for some of those, for certain orgs, isn't there? Where it's like we're organising because we're practicing, and when the game goes live, we'll know what we're doing. And so, if you make your own fun up as an org, I think this is another thing that you could do that will bring you fun. Like I see many orgs organising stuff around crafting and crafting resources, but because like it kind of stops there at this stage, there isn't the ability to build a base, which would require so much stuff and like months worth of effort from org. I don't know where it kind of goes past the like playing with it. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I do agree.
What
do you think
guys do?
I mean, From my perspective, as an org in the game right now, your main thing is creating, like you said, is creating activity. Star Citizen offers some pretty cool opportunities in the multiplayer aspect, but you have to do some planning and some hard work to make those happen still. So the power of being in an org is that you have access to those things. So the most important thing for an org to do then is to supply those things. It's right now it's fine with exploits and like an easy economy, and the wipe is a year behind us. It's easy to tell people like you need to bring your own stuff to this event and take part in it. But eventually, if you're going to be doing your own things and asking people to come and do stuff for your org, you need to supply them, right? You need to supply the ships, armor, weapons, utility, even the food that you're going to be eating on the trip. So like you have to fund that stuff, you have to craft that stuff, you have to make the stuff that is standard issue for your org. So that's the kind of stuff we'd probably be working on right now. But as you insinuated, that's not nearly as demanding as building a base or potentially cornering the market on a really valuable product and then selling that and having to get the resources to make that product and stuff. So it is a little bit of role playing right now, but I am curious as to, like you said, a lot of the focus in orgs is around hardcore places like Hathor and Lazarus and stuff like that. But the goal of this game overall is that we're not all headed towards the same hotspots. Like we complain now because Lazarus and Hathor and Onyx are all have players around them and like everybody is going there. But those are popular. Those just came out. Over time when there's 1,000 locations and
Yeah.
most players have seen 400 of them, you can stumble across those locations, find some valuable resource, lock it down and take it with you. And it's not like suddenly a huge org war starts
Yeah.
up. But I am wondering if that same thing can happen now where because suddenly minerals matter and maybe the quality scattering matters, some org might find out that underneath OM5 on Lyria, you can get a whole bunch of really high quality laranite. And that word may make its way out into the community and suddenly people are coming there because they want to get the good stuff and it's like a quote natural jump town sort of thing. Do you think there is enough catalyst for that sort of thing to happen with this first version of crafting?
Oh, I don't know. I don't know. I don't know if there's enough purpose behind it. I don't know if the goal is big enough for for an org to do any. Like, I do think that most orgs will like test this out. They'll run some stuff around it, but is there enough of a goal there for them to like properly do what you're describing? I'm not sure. Again,
Yeah.
as we keep saying, caveating everything, we don't know how this exactly comes into the game, and so depending on the time frame, depending on what they add over the next iterations of this, maybe. But I think as it is right now, the biggest thing that you can craft itself is a ship weapon, a ship gun, and that I don't
I
think is a big
honestly, dude,
enough.
for I genuinely thought, I don't know why, but I filled in the blank there. I thought you were gonna say the biggest thing you could craft right now is a friendship. And I was gonna be like,
Well,
oh,
that was better.
he's
That's
got
better. That's a better answer than what I said. I guess that ultimately is what orgs are doing. You are crafting friendships. There you go. Yeah. That's better than what I was saying.
That's what CIG is really
Uh,
building here. It's not a game, it's just a bunch of friendships. But yeah, sorry, keep going.
paid friendships for CIG, where we pay them to be friends. Anyway, no, I'm done. I'm done.
But you were talking about the ability to craft stuff and if that was actually gonna matter to an org.
Yeah, I just don't think there's a big enough item in there that changes anything. Unless you're unless you're like a ship combat PvP org, and you're like, well, this is the best gun. Here's how you craft it, and we basically need every single one of our members to have, let's say,
The
oh,
best gun.
the whatever it is, some sort of repeater or whatever, the best gun. They
The
spend,
P8 SC, of course.
yeah. Well, for I much prefer the C54. Is it? I don't know. Anyway,
That's not bad. That's a good second choice.
yeah. Anyway, but yeah. So for a PvP org who wants to kit out all their ships with the best guns, then there's a goal. But if that isn't your thing, it's not like, yeah. I think like you mentioned earlier, if say salvage attachments or whatever were a possibility in this first version, well then everybody who's like an industrial org is going to spend a serious amount of time focusing on, again, getting a massive supply of those attachments so that whenever they're doing stuff as an org, they've got them. That's like a long-term goal. But because it is just kind of combat stuff in this first stuff that you can test, that you can craft, I think that is going to limit how excited orgs are about doing that. But
Okay.
I mean, the other thing to factor into this is all. I hate to mention it, but the dreaded word wipe is obviously in the air, and so how much effort is anybody going to put into this?
Yeah.
Like building up their big supply of stuff as an org, when you're like, well, it just could get wiped. So, yeah.
Well, I think everybody is kind of expecting that this edition is going to be what prompts their next wipe.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just
that's fair.
inventory wise. What do you think? Think it's going to happen?
Yeah, that makes sense. It would make sense that when this came, well, yeah, it would make sense around the sort of time of doing this that you would wipe. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. God, it's going to be awful to look through the whole inventory and like try to
Yeah.
figure everything out. Although I will say
Uh,
this, one of the most exciting parts of this is that this doesn't just make things exciting because you're going out and you're finding blueprints or you're mining or you're salvaging. For people like me who like to just go out, run FPS gameplay, explore, sorry to trigger some folks, but like to just go around and find stuff. You've probably also noticed that we're picking up these metals, these ingots, these things that are like old Unification War artifacts and stuff in these loot boxes. And I am really interested in seeing what kind of cool materials they could have those things dismantle into that allow you to do some other crafting. Because now it's, it's a new version of salvage. It's not
Yep.
it's not salvage like you're pulling apart ships, but you're salvaging, you're scavenging, you're getting little bits and bobs that might actually go into other things in the future. So I would say please clear my inventory because I want to like start fresh with those bits and bobs.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think the dismantling side of things, again, for the looter type player, I think that's maybe more, not more exciting, but it's a hugely exciting part of all this. In that yeah, wherever you are, whatever gameplay you're doing, you actually are encouraged to loot all the loot boxes, and the things that you're looking for now are not just this cool armor that's rare or whatever, but you're looking for things that will recycle or dismantle into things that you can either sell to other people or you craft yourself. So I think it makes every loot box it's like every loot box is a mini lottery in some ways, and you get that rush of like, oh, what am I going to get? And then probably nothing. But again, to
Dung.
for the third time mention Arc Raiders, that game has got this down well. Is that you run around looting things, again, often looking for blueprints, but there's a rush when you get something really valuable or something you don't have or something you really want. You get that feeling of like, this is amazing. And again, in that game, you can dismantle everything and recycle it all.
Yeah.
It in theory adds a huge layer to what you do when you're playing the game, especially on foot, I suppose.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's going to be big. That will be big.
And I feel like I can confirm I saw that. I saw something like a power regulator being called for in the construction of an item. What I don't remember is if that power regulator was made by a commodity or if it was something that could be found. But like I said,
Interesting.
there are a couple little things you can find in the game already. I don't remember what they're called, but they're like little items that have been showing up here and there that you find and you're like, well, this has no use in the game. Is this like the kind of thing that maybe could go into a recipe later? So I'm
Yeah.
very, very hopeful we have stuff like that. I think it would be a huge missed opportunity if it wasn't just like commodities. And they have said that it's like Valakar fangs and horns and like other organic materials, gases, things like that. So I think that is the way that it's going to go. That's going to be really cool.
Yeah,
But
I think
we'll just have to see.
I think it not just being pure materials would make some sense. Yeah, I mean, somebody was joking on the video I put out about recycling bodies. dismantling bodies. What does that give you? So, but then that turns into the regen material stuff.
That's food crafting, dude. You're talking about the kitchen edition. Let's not get into that.
I'm not sure people want to necessarily eat human bodies, but yeah, maybe. But yeah,
It's nutrition, dude. The nutrition crafting.
I think that's called cannibalism, but
Is it?
anyway.
Is it? In Pyro, they just call it beef chunks, dude.
Well, true, yeah. Yeah, I've had some of those, so maybe I'm a cannibal. Anyway, that's gone in a direction I wasn't expecting. Yeah, it's there's all sorts that they could do with it, and exciting.
Yeah. All right, man. I think that's a great note to leave off on. Cannibalism is good stuff and indicative of the direction of crafting in Star Citizen. Could you let folks know where they can find more of? I mean, you put out a video talking about your own experiences, right? Where can people go to find that?
Yeah. So TenPoundFortyTwo on YouTube. Yeah, I put out a video where pretty sure you can do this, but the Evocati rules don't state you can't do bad drawings, as far as I'm aware. So I did some bad drawings of how the UI looked and how it all worked. So that's on the YouTube channel. But yeah, also on Twitch as well, TenPoundFortyTwo, in UK morning times for anybody who's around Monday, Wednesday, Friday. So yeah, no, it's all been fun and games on Twitch and YouTube.
Is one of those streamers.
Apparently so now.
Thank you though for the bad UI drawing was endearing, and I would say it's pretty accurate. Appreciate your coverage though, dude, and thank you so much for coming on the show today. It's always a good talk. Thank you to all of you lovely people, your good freaking shite branding faces and lovely names. Thanks for listening or watching. If you would rather listen and not watch, you could, YouTube Premium I think lets you do that, or you could join us on the audio platforms: Spotify, Apple, Amazon, Pocket Casts, MySpace Music, maybe. I don't know. There are places where you can listen, though, on your morning commutes, on your daily walk, whatever it is you might be doing. We are happy to join you for some space nerd conversation. I hope you got some more out of not just learning about crafting in gameplay in Star Citizen, but hopefully a look at the philosophy and design of it. That this is not just a game about taking missions, shooting people, and collecting stuff. Like there are multiple aspects and methods of progressing in this game, or at least the game that they're trying to make. And I hope that people can come into this podcast and just learn more and understand a little bit better how the game's going. Either way, one last time, TenPound, thank you so much for joining me, dude.
Okay.
And thank you all for watching. Have a lovely time. I will see you all next week.